Well, hello, friends. So today we're going to be getting a peek into the writing world. I talk about so many things, parenting and homeschooling and caring for elderly people, all the fun things. And so I'm excited to talk about kind of my writing world and the writing world of other people. So today I have Ken and Deb Raney. They are here and we're going to talk about all the different publishing options. And so I'm so excited to have them. I've known Deb, I don't even know how many years, 20, 25, a long time. A long time. But welcome, friend. And why don't you guys just start by introducing yourselves?
Okay, ladies first. Well, I have been writing for 30 years now. I started on New Year's Day, 1994, and that does not seem possible, but it is. I knew from the time I was 12 years old that someday I wanted to write a book. And what kind of pushed me into the writing is that we had an oops baby when our other kids were almost teenagers. Well, one of them was a teenager. And so I started writing as a way to be able to stay home with that baby and
Mm,
yet still help our kids with college. And so I really knew nothing. I was a voracious reader. I loved books, but I knew nothing about writing one. But I learned a lot, and that my first piece of advice to writers is read voraciously because you will
mhm.
absorb a lot about what good writing looks like if you read good books. So I wrote my first novel. It took me about 5 months, which is, excuse me, about the fastest I think I've ever written a book before. And I started sending it out and I got tons and tons of rejections. But ultimately, I got a contract with Bethany House Publishers for two novels. And actually, the advance on royalties for those two novels put our oldest son through college. And so it was an
Wow.
answer to prayer for sure. But more than that, I learned so much about the craft of writing from my editor, Sharon Asmus, who is in heaven now, but she was my wonderful editor there. And I have been writing ever since. I really thought I have four kids. I thought maybe I'll write four books and be done, but I just have continued to love writing. And actually, I hate writing. I love having written. And so,
Exactly.
yeah,
The process
which
sometimes I'm
most
like, why
writers
am I
say that.
doing this? Yeah.
Yeah,
Why
it's
am I
hard
doing this?
work. It's very hard work, and I have about 30 some traditionally published books and two indie novels, and then we have reissued my backlist. So I'm a
Mhm.
hybrid author now as well. So
I love that.
yeah.
Well, I am an illustrator and graphic designer, and I have got drug into this through her because I've started helping other writers get their books published, and so I've got a little bit of background in this. I also have written and illustrated several books, a couple children's
Mm.
fiction books that were
Mhm.
published, and some things like that. So I've been in the publishing world for quite a while. Also, nothing's been made into a movie yet, but maybe someday.
And
Yeah.
honestly, it's all the rejections that he got when he was pitching his children's book is what made me keep going. Because I'm one who, two rejections, I would have
Wow.
given up. But he was rejected, I think, 80 times by 80 different publishers. And he just has this stick to itiveness that said, I'm just going to turn around and start sending it back to the same people again. And as you know, Tricia, that's exactly what
Mhm.
you have to do because there's such a turnover in
There
the
is.
editorial world, and he ended up getting two picture books published that way. So,
I
yeah,
love that. And also being married to a writer. I mean, you've been in the writing world as long as she's been in the writing world. Uh,
yeah, for sure.
all the things. Okay, so you talked about your first book. What was your first book, Deb?
A Vow to Cherish.
Okay.
And it was a story about, I'll call it a family saga, a story about a
Mhm.
family dealing with the wife's diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. And
Mhm. And then what happened with that movie?
it got turned into, and I probably wouldn't still be writing today if that
Yeah.
novel had not been made into a movie by Billy
Mhm.
Graham Evangelistic Association's Worldwide Pictures, and that got me a little bit of attention in the writing world, and got me a couple of contracts probably, and again, I've been writing ever since. So
And I love that how, like, we are just like, "Okay, I'm gonna do this." this thing. I don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe I might write 4 books, but I really believe that like God uses our words to impact people. Well, we know everywhere we go, people can remember characters or scenes, and this really has changed my life. And I'm like, what book was that in? Like I know, like and I know God uses me in the moment, but how he can continue to use our words and then the movie. And it's almost like he's like, okay, yes, you're doing this in faithfulness for one little thing, but I have so much in store. And I think that
Yeah.
is wonderful. And as we're talking about all the different publishing avenues today, because there's so many ways that were so different when we first started. My first writers conference was in 1994. Steve Laube's first writing conference was in 1994. We talk about that. He's now published one of my books. He told me back then, he's like, it'll only take 20 years to be an overnight success.
Yep.
And I said,
What
Steve, it
always
actually,
says that about the art
yeah,
world too.
yeah. I
Yeah.
said, Steve, it actually took 30 for you to publish me. So, um, but there are so many different avenues. So if you want to share just a little bit about kind of your journey from traditional publisher to indie and hybrid. And because I think when you kind of like, I'm going to do this and publish my own novel, I'm like, I'm watching Deb. I'm like, how are they doing this? Because I think again, that we love our publishers and they're amazing, but they can only publish so many books a
Mhm.
year. And I'll talk to new authors and I'll say, they're like, I really want to be published by like Bethany House, or they'll name a publisher. That we all love these publishers. And I'm like, okay, but which one of their best-selling authors isn't going to give them a book that's you're going
Yes.
to be in that place? And so it really is that it's not that your writing lacks worth, because
Yeah.
their writing is amazing in so many ways, but it's just those avenues. So let's talk about your journey
Mhm.
navigating those different avenues.
Sure. Well, I didn't, I mean, there really weren't a lot of options 30 years ago when
Mhm.
I started.
Right.
You could spend a fortune trying to self-publish your book, have someone else do everything, and that was very different than it is now. And
Mhm.
literally might have cost you $20,000, which
Yes.
is the other way, traditional publishing, that's what they would pay you as an
Mhm.
advance on royalties. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to make money. That was my, I
Yeah,
mean, why I had a passion for writing, excuse me, but my goal was to make money to put our kids through college. And so I didn't try any other methods. I just
Mhm.
started, I finished my manuscript and I started sending it out to publishers. Excuse me. And I started writing on January 1st, and by November, I did have a contract. I actually had 3 contract offers, and sadly, I did not have an agent. That was back when
Mm.
you could get your books in front of, even without going to writers' conferences, you could get your book in front of publishers just by sending them the manuscript. Now, it's changed a lot, and that isn't
Mhm.
possible with most publishers now. But I just sent it out. I just kept sending it, and I ignored the rejections because that's what my husband had done, and I knew that was, what you do. And sure enough, I got a contract. Well, first contract was for 2 books with Bethany House Publishers, and then they signed me for another one. But when I pitched my fourth novel to them, I had not finished writing it yet, and it was
Mm.
Beneath a Southern Sky, which is the story of a woman who finds herself with 2 husbands, both of whom she loves dearly, and they just did not see how it could possibly end well. I didn't know how it was going to end because I'm a seat of the pants writer, but I knew I could do it. I knew it would end well. And because that, my characters knew God, and that's how God works.
That's right.
So anyway, they said, we just can't contract that until you finished it, but feel free to
Mhm.
send it back to us. I
Mhm.
said, well, we have a kid going to college. I need money. Our daughter by this time was now going to college. And so I said, am I free to send it to other publishers? And they said, yes, we have refused it. And so first rights of
Mhm.
refusal, you are free to send it. And I happened to meet Lisa Bergren at a writers
Mhm.
conference, and I told her my story. She loved it. She was with Waterbrook Press at the time,
Yeah.
and she had me share it with a couple of other editors there, and they bought it. They trusted that I would figure out a good
Mhm.
way to end it, and I did. God and I figured out a great
And
way.
that book I love. So when I was thinking about this morning, the books, that one stood to the top. Is just what, like, one of my favorites that I just love. And I remember being in the part reading, I don't know, 3/4 through. I'm like, there's no way she could solve this. Like, I have no idea how this is gonna work out. And it's a good
Mhm.
story. Anyway, go ahead.
I do love that story, and it ended
Yeah.
up being a 3-book series, and what's interesting is the first book was published in 2001, and the 3rd book just came out 2 years ago, so
Oh.
it's a story that has, kind of dragged, but I had so many readers asking for a 3rd book, and
Mhm.
I loved the way all of them turned out, but anyway, that's how I got another publisher, and in a way, I was very sad and almost felt like a traitor to Bethany House because I hadn't
Mhm.
waited for them. But financially, I needed, to sell that manuscript. And so that got me a 4-book contract with Waterbrook. But then my books weren't selling very well with Waterbrook.
Mm.
They had a lot of really good authors that were selling very well. And like you were saying, Trisha, sometimes you have to step out of the way, whether you want to or not,
Yeah.
so that their next big new author can come in.
Mhm.
So I have written for probably 7 or 8 or 9 different publishers. I have just written for a lot of them. One reason you want to write with more than one publisher is that there's a lot of waiting time involved in writing
Mhm.
for a traditional publisher. When you sign the contract, it is most likely going to be at least 2 years before that book comes out. And while you're spending 2 or 3 months waiting to hear from your editor about whether they liked your book or not and how much rewrite it needs, you might as well be writing another book in the meantime. And so
Mhm.
that's what I did. And I kind of dovetailed and have written for 2 or 3 publishers at a time most of my career. And
Mhm.
that's a good thing, and it can be not a great thing because you kind of don't feel like you belong anywhere. You're just kind of
Mhm.
a visitor at every publisher. And I would have loved having one publisher who was loyal and faithful to me, and that's just not the way my story goes. And it's that
Right.
way for a lot of different
Right.
authors. Anyway, the industry has changed so much over the 30 years I've been writing, and there came a point when my books were not my older books were not selling at all. They had been out for 15, 20 years, and
Mhm.
my publisher still had them and still had the rights to them, but they were um, publish on demand, POD, and they were charging $20 for them. Who's going to buy a soft cover book at $20? So I started asking for rights back to my books.
Mhm.
And most of the publishers were extremely reluctant to give me rights back to the books for whatever reason. I've heard all kinds of speculations on why that might be, but finally, I was able to get the rights back to I think about 18 of my books originally. A little side story: Ken had been laid off from his job about that time,
Mm.
and it just so happens when you get the rights back to a book, you don't get the rights back to the cover. And
Yeah.
so I needed new covers designed. And here he was. And here all my friends who were getting their rights back were needing covers. And so he had a built-in new job. And he's still doing that to this day and has done, hundreds of covers for
Mhm.
me and for other authors. So anyway, I still was writing for traditional publishers, even as we were putting my backlist out and discovering that we could make quite nice money on those back issues with the new covers for a
Mhm.
whole new generation of readers. And so that's where I became hybrid. And then we started noticing that, at least for me, now I'm a B-list author. My books sell okay, but they don't sell great. And so the advance on royalties that I was being offered from publishing houses shrunk. It shrunk for big
Mhm.
authors too, but it shrunk
Right.
dramatically for a mid-list author like myself. And so, having gotten our feet wet in the indie market, with these reissues, we started saying maybe we should just not sign with a publisher this time and do our own. And that's what we did. We now have 2 complete, original indies out. Everything else is backlist. and a couple of novellas and some smaller projects. And I'll be honest, I doubt that I will ever, I mean, it'd have to be a really phenomenal offer for me to ever sign with a traditional publisher again. And that's not, a knock on traditional publishers at all. I'm so thankful I started with them, and
Mhm.
I have the utmost respect for the editors that I have worked with and for the Christian book industry. I love it. They gave me my start, and I'm so thankful. But we're in a new era, and
Mhm.
writers with the right knowledge and the right gifts and skills can indie publish and be very successful at it. So,
Yeah, I love that, and I love that, I mean, it's like such a learning process just working with editors, and I feel like with different publishing houses and different editors, I learn something from every editor. So you're building your skills. You have a built-in cover designer that
yeah,
like most people are not married to a cover designer. I'm not, but
yeah,
that was like a gift that you had that you
yeah,
were able to use, and then
yeah.
relationships within the industry for editing, for friends that I know I have friends we read each other's stuff. I mean, there
Mhm.
is relationships really are important, and we still have relationships with people we worked with in the past, different editors. I love going to conferences, but it's amazing how God, he kind of gives us these things that we can look back and now and say, wow, we have so many resources that we can turn to,
Yes.
and that we can use to get the books out there. And that's really what the readers care about. It's just
Mhm.
another story. I
Yes.
have avid readers of Christian fiction Facebook group, which has almost 30,000 members. We're at
Mhm.
29.9 right now on the
That's
members,
awesome.
and they just read books, and that's
Yeah,
all they talk about all day long. And I will talk about like, who's your favorite publisher, and it's like they don't even look anymore.
that's
So
right.
it's not the same as when that we used to go to bookstores and you walk to the fiction section and you
Mhm.
see the little labels of the different publishing houses, and okay, I like this publisher. They're just searching for certain things, or things are recommended, or when they buy a book it says you might like these. And so Amazon is feeding them, and if they read on Kindle Unlimited or Kindle, they don't really even see much of the cover. Sorry, Ken, but but really
That's true.
they're just reading. They just want the next story. And so I think it is a different world where before that there was kind of more clout being with a traditional publisher. But I think a lot of readers, and there is still in some situations, but with a lot of readers, they're just looking for the next story. And these are people, in fact, I started this group because I asked people, how many books do you read a year? And they were saying 200, 300, 400. I'm like, I can't imagine, but
Yeah,
they just do. They just
yeah,
fast readers, or they have a
yeah.
job where they are sitting a long time and they read, or they're retired. So,
Or they're
just
listening to audiobooks on their
listen.
commute. Yeah.
I probably listen to an audiobook probably 3 or 4 a month.
Yeah.
And I'm busy. I'm doing all kinds of stuff, but I'm folding laundry and I am cooking dinners and I'm listening to audiobooks. So, yeah, there is that world. So, when we're making the plunge like you did, what are maybe some questions that people should ask themselves, like which direction they should go when it comes to choosing a publishing avenue?
Mhm. Well, I would say, if you are like me and you don't know anything about the publishing industry, you first need to educate yourself. And
Mhm.
if for people like that, I really recommend trying to find a traditional publisher, just
Mhm.
because you will learn so much and they will do all the hard things that you don't know
Mhm.
about, like editing and cover design and marketing. Somewhat, they don't do as much
Yeah.
marketing as they used to, but that if you just don't know what you're in for, and honestly, I didn't even know what I didn't know, and that's kind of
Mhm.
hard to
Mhm.
handle. But if you're in that position, then I would suggest that you try to find a traditional publisher, which means first trying to find an agent who will pitch your
Mhm.
books for you. And the best thing to do there is go to a writer's conference.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
will learn so much, and you will make connections with people who can help you learn the things you don't know.
Mhm.
If you are a little more savvy and you know quite a bit about the publishing world, and especially if you have a speaking ministry, if you have opportunities
Mhm.
to speak and sell your books at an event, you could do very well as an indie
Mhm.
author. in today's world where you don't have to have 20,000 books sitting out in your garage in boxes because they
Right.
are print on demand and you can order as many as you think you'll need. And if you have connections with people who can do your cover design and a lot of authors have a son or a daughter who is a graphic designer because that's a
Mm-hmm.
big deal, and so there's resources if you don't have a great eye for cover design or don't know those programs. There's probably somebody that in your church or family who can do that for you and do a pretty good job. So in that case, you might be ready for
Mm-hmm.
indie publishing. So, but
Those are good.
there's a big learning curve.
Yeah, there is a big yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And Ken, let's talk about cover design because I mentioned,
Can I
on
add,
Kindle, you will just get what was that?
can I add something to what she said?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you also need to look at what your goal is,
Yes.
Mm,
because some people that I've run across, they just wrote a book. I think this one lady, like she's 80 years old. She's probably never going to write another book,
Yeah.
So she
mm,
just wants to get that book out to share with her family and friends and stuff
Yes.
like that. So
yes.
your
Yes.
goal, what you're wanting to do, if you're wanting to do this and turn it into some sort of a business, that's going to be different than if you're writing a family memoir or something like that, or
Yes.
the
Yes.
history or what. I mean, because there's all kinds of books, there's all kinds of I don't know, things you want to do with what you got to say, and
Yeah.
that makes a difference on where you want to go. A lot of this
Mhm.
stuff you can find out about it online, but I do think going to a writers conference would be a really good, and there's a lot of small local or regional
Mhm.
writers conferences that are not very expensive, that you can go there and start getting some answers to some of your questions, and then you can start praying about it and seeing where you want to go from there. But until you got some of that information, it's pretty hard to know what to do. And because I get that all the time from authors, and
Mhm.
they say, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I just wrote this book and I want to get it out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I always say go to the local conferences to learn how to write.
Yes.
And go to the bigger conferences once you know how to write and are ready to start meeting editors and agents and make the connections that will get your book published. So
Yeah. I went to my first writers conference. So Leslie she's 32 now. So she was a baby in a stroller, pushed my little umbrella stroller in there with my friend Cindy. And we sat down at this conference and this little writing group, it was a little writing like mini conference group. And they were talking about this world that editors and agents and manuscripts and everything was new. I had like no idea how a book even got published or what happened. And it was those little baby steps. It was like we heard about this thing and we went together and we were so nervous and we were so poor. My husband was in college
yeah.
delivering Domino's pizza at night and I had two babies
Yeah.
and walked in there with my umbrella stroller and then we went to the local bookstore and we put our money together. This is how poor we're to buy our first Writer's Digest magazine that we shared, and we went to the library. It's like, and I
Love
think now everything's at our fingertips. Like you can go to YouTube or go to. I tell people a lot if you don't know how to do something, go to
Yeah.
YouTube, put it in, and a 20-year-old is going to tell you how to do it.
Yes, and it's so much easier to learn on YouTube because they're showing you. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, the other day I needed to figure out how to download. I did some live videos in Facebook. I'm like, how do I download a live video in Facebook in my private groups?
Mhm.
And he looked like he was 15. I don't know, but he's like, go do this and this, and I learned how to do it. So there are so many resources out there now, but
Yeah.
which also can be overwhelming, right?
Yeah,
We
that's true.
and
Yeah.
so there are a lot of things, but I do want to get to talk about cover design because Ken, I'm going to need your help here. And we're going to have a talk after this because when I first got my rights back, again, Deb, like you, just a lot of books.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, they're just going to be online. I went to Canva and made some stuff. They look okay. Like they're okay. They're fine. But I speak a lot. So this is what you said. Unless if you speak a lot, that's a different thing. And I go to homeschool conferences. I have a double booth with bookshelves facing out, and you could pretty clearly see the ones that are traditionally published and the ones I did.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference when people buy them because they're looking at them. The books need to be visually appealing, and that's what catches their attention first. There's an image, there's something intriguing that draws them in. And so I'm like, okay, I'm at the point now. I need to invest some money to actually get some covers on covering them because the stories are so good. Like, people love the stories. And I don't want to say don't look at the cover, but you'll enjoy the book. Usually my husband's there, and I sell double when he's at my booth, because he just tells, like, she talked to this veteran and she did this, and like he like shares, like, which I don't do that by myself. Like, I'm like look at me, but he just talks about all the things, and it does really well. But so they buy the books despite the covers. But let's talk about the importance of covers and how that is actually part of the storytelling. It's the storytelling before the storytelling, right?
Yeah.
It's the advertisement.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing about a cover, if it doesn't look very professional,
Mm-hmm.
then the buyer automatically thinks that the story's not going to be very good either. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And you can learn how to design covers, and the images and everything are fairly easy. But what separates a professional looking cover from one that doesn't is usually a typography.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people who are not professionals at it, or have a lot of experience at it, they have like 2 or 3 fonts they use for everything, and so it ends up all the covers start looking the same.
It's always Zappino for the title.
And so good type. I'm not a great typographer, but I do a good enough job to make it look like the cover and the typography go together, and it looks like what's inside the book. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's usually the main thing that happens. I always liken it to, you used to be able to buy business cards real cheap.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they gang them up. But if you ever did it, they only gave you like 4 fonts to choose from. You could have this font. This Souvenir was always one of them, Helvetica. And you had 4 different fonts. So every business card came from that company, had one of those 4 fonts. Well, that's kind of like what some of these book covers look like, is that there's just, I don't know what the right word is, but they just don't have a lot of selection and a lot of thought going into the typography.
Yeah. And also the same stock images for characters. So I had a book that I did a cover for my Titanic book and found some girl, and she's really pretty. Well, then a traditional publisher within the same month I released my book had I can't remember what author it was, but it had the same girl on the cover for a traditionally published book. And someone's like, did you know that this was on her cover too? So you only have a certain number of images, especially if it's like a period clothing that people are wearing that are out there. That one Amish girl in the blue dress looking off in the distance, I don't know how many thousands of covers.
Yes, exactly.
Well, now I have to, and I don't want to start a huge controversy, but I've started using AI because I generate my own stock images that way.
Yeah.
And I taught a class at Blue Ridge about cover design, and at the last 10 minutes of it, I said, I wanted to talk to you about this because I think this is a common thing. And the number one issue that I run into with covers is the author invariably has written a historical, and it features, every one of them does this. It's a red-haired Irish lady, in the 1860s, in Ireland on the shore with green eyes. And you cannot find stock photography for that. I mean, literally, you cannot find it at all.
Or there's one and everybody uses it. Yeah.
So I plugged that in the prompt in Mid-Journey, which is the AI program that I use, and generated this picture. I saved the picture because I said, everybody's jaw just dropped. It's absolutely gorgeous. She has freckles. You can see the weave in her linen shirt, and you can see the shore of the Ireland in the background, and you put the right aspect ratio. It's tailor-made for a cover. I wanted to use it for a cover for somebody.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous picture. So I've been really excited about that. I've used it on a number of covers. Now you can't always, because sometimes it's definitely got a mind of its own.
Mm-hmm.
Deb had a series that we recovered, and two of the guys on the covers in the series didn't have beards. I tell you, for the life of me, I could not get Mid-Journey to make a guy without a beard. Every one of them had a beard, and we had to jump through all kinds of hoops to finally get that. One of them, I had to retouch all the hair off of his face.
Oh, wow.
So you just you have to learn to work with it. It is getting better and better. They've gotten really a lot better about fingers. You know, it was a big deal that they put 6 fingers on her. The fingers would be broken and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They've gotten way better at that, but there's still some things that they haven't done, and I'm trying to follow it really close. There's a lot of competitive companies coming out that specialize in certain things like resizing your image, and another one is if you've got a really low res photo, they'll I forget what they call it, but they'll up the resolution.
Oh, yeah, sharpen it, yeah.
So it can be used for a larger size, and there's just a lot of things coming along that it's getting very exciting what they're going to do. And I found a couple artists they're taking AI and they're using it like beyond anything anybody else even thought about.
Wow.
It's amazing stuff. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, that solves some of the issues. So I'm working on one right now, and it's I think it's a Scottish landmark of some sort. Well, I plugged that into AI, and it didn't have a clue what that was.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
Yeah.
fortunately, I was able to find some stock photography of this area with these rock formations or whatever, because it was a specific place and specific look. So sometimes you can't do it, but sometimes you can. So
Yeah. I love that, like, we're using tools, but we still have to have human creativity behind it. And inspiration is the breath of God. And so we can use tools, but you need people to inspire the machines. And I was thinking, as you were talking, like, this is the new thing, but I was able to tour a house of when we lived in Montana. There was a Frank Frank Bird Linderman. He would go to the Native American tribes and he learned their language and he would write their stories. And so his granddaughter said, "Do you want to see his writing cabin?" It was down on Flathead Lake. And we went there and he had the handwritten manuscripts. She had all of them that he hand wrote them and they were scribbled out. And then he would type them and then he would have to retype them. And so I'm sure when just even typewriters came out and then word processing came out and now I could get my grammar checked. And sometimes I don't want it because I don't want my sentences to sound that too perfect, but there are these tools that help us in many ways. So even with cover design or these things, but also like my daughter is a missionary in the Czech Republic and she talked with, I'd video call her probably 3 or 4 times a week. And she said, Mom, back in the day when people went to go be missionaries, they actually would buy a coffin or a wooden coffin and pack their things in it because they knew they would not come home and they needed a coffin to be buried wherever they went. And it was just like also a symbol of I'm dedicating my whole life to the Lord. And now we can publish a book. We could get it. I just talked to someone who had used AI to have his book translated into German. And then he has a friend that went and checked for errors and the typos. And so now he's able to publish his book in German. It was a book on prayer. And so there's so many things. And I really think that go into the world, like go ye into the world. We're able to do that in different ways now where we don't have to pack all our things into a coffin, set off in a ship, and our books can go out. So I think these tools where people might have problems, I'm the person that's like, whatever tools we have that can continue to share positive, clean, hope-filled stories, share hope with the world. Let's use whatever tools we have to do that and to reach people. So that's my take on it. I know there's a lot of controversy, and it's kind of one of those things like if I have peace in my heart on something and know that God is able to use these things for good, I'm not going to worry so much about. I mean, I'll listen, but I'm not going to worry so much about some of those things. So that's my take on it. Yeah.
Yep, gotcha. And amen. Preach.
Yes.
I saw a thing one time. This guy was saying that Christians or Christianity or Christians usually are one of the first adopters of new technology. So when
Really?
so when the internet came out, there was a Christian Bible on there really quick. Same way
Mm,
with your phone. One of the first apps was a Bible app, and then there's dozens of them now.
mhm.
And there's a guy named Frank Turek who's a very well-known apologist, and he goes around and talks to colleges because he wrote a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist." So he speaks at colleges, and he has a podcast. He does 2 a week or something like that. One of the things they're doing right now is they're using AI to translate all of their podcasts to different languages around the world to get
Wow.
that information out to all over the world. So it's
The passion that we have for the story that we're telling with every novel we write
Mhm.
um, makes us that way,
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The very first reader letter I ever received, it was my first book that came out with Moody. It's a World War II novel. And it had been translated in German, which I thought was pretty interesting since it was about Nazis
World
and
War II.
concentration camps. But okay. And my very first email, not long after the book came out, was from a young woman in Switzerland. And it was in broken English. And she said, when your main character, Helene, got on her knees and accepted Christ, I did too. And I'm
Wow.
like, that's the first letter and I'm done. Like, if I never do anything again, like God
I
can
am
do that.
too.
And that's the
Yeah.
amazing thing in the world. The population is growing and there's so many people that don't have never don't have a neighbor that can share Christ. They don't have, but they can maybe find a book online or read something, a blog post or a social media post. So I do think that these things, it's no surprise to God. Like he knew technology was coming. And if we
Right.
are using
Right.
it to spread the word and glorify him.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk about are some of the tools that we need. And I'm not talking about like computers or AI for cover design, which those are wonderful, but just the heart of a writer. Again, when I go to conferences, there's so much discouragement. People want to give up. They are waiting for the traditional publisher to tell them they're going to be the next best-selling author, and when they don't get that, they just tuck their book away. And I have so many people that have multiple that I know that have multiple manuscripts that haven't seen the light of day. So let's talk about that. So some of those either emotional or spiritual or grit and tenacity, like what are some things that, because it is a different world to navigate self-publishing or some of these things, but like talk about that.
Well, for me, patience all along the way. Patience has, and I'm not a very patient person, Ken will tell you that, but I have become more patient just because of my writing career. Patience to wait until you're ready to write that story.
Mhm.
I see some 19-year-olds trying to write, stories, and some 19-year-olds have written amazing stories, but until you've lived some life,
Mhm.
it's hard to write a really deep story that touches on the places that you want your readers to go. And so be willing to live some life before you write maybe a certain story. Be willing to wait on the publisher to, the right publisher to find you, wait on the right time in your life. A friend of mine, when I started sharing with a few select friends that I was passionate and wanted to write a book, I was a mom at home with 4 kids at the time. And she said, "Why don't you start? Just start now." And I told her, and this was for me. I know writers who write with 6 kids, all around them, and they do a wonderful job at being a mom and being a writer. But I told my friend, I know that I am so passionate about wanting to write this book that my family would be neglected if I started
Mhm.
now, because
Mhm.
I don't multitask very well, and I know that. So know yourself. That's another thing.
Mhm.
You need to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and be willing to just give those to God and ask Him when is the perfect time. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt when that perfect time came, and it just happened to be on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1994. I knew that God was saying, "Now, start now."
Mm.
And I did. And then I am also a procrastinator, and I am a
Ken's just smiling over here.
Type B.
yeah, I'm very type B. Yes, absolutely. So I have had to learn to focus and concentrate um,
Mhm.
and remember who I'm writing for and not slough off the hard work, the hard parts of it, and the get it done part of it. and being okay with that you will never ever have your book perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing at a Christy Awards banquet, it was a relative of Catherine Marshall saying that it took her 10 years to write the book Christy because she was never happy with it. She never thought it was quite ready. And it was, you read the book and it's just
Mm-hmm.
about perfect, but I'm
Yeah.
sure it was probably plenty perfect 5 years before she published it, or maybe 8 years before she published it.
Mm-hmm.
So know yourself. Some people are perfectly happy to put out something that isn't done well enough, and other people hang on to it to their
Mm-hmm.
last breath because they don't think it's perfect enough. And so know which side of that trait you fall on, and then do what you need to do to get your book out there at the right time. And
Yeah.
only God knows what that is, because it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and talking about that perfect thing, there'll always be those reviews. I'm like, why did I pick a job where everyone judges everything I do?
Yes, yeah,
And so you have
uh-huh,
lots of 5-star reviews, but it's that 1 star or 2 star. You're like,
yeah,
what? What? Why
yeah,
would you say that? Or how could you say I didn't research enough? I like talked to 100 veterans. Like, what else? But I now years later, I'm like, it's their whatever background noise they have going on impacts how they read something. And now I know that the reader brings as much to the book as the
yes,
writer does. And so before I was so confused, like, what? How can there be 5-star reviews, 4-star reviews? When like it's not a
yeah,
judge of me because they're
yeah,
bringing whatever they have going on to the book too.
yes.
And sometimes they pick out really good points where I'm like, ooh, I that is a weakness of mine. I am going to work on that. So there's those things too, but there's sometimes it's like, well, that's just, I think there's something going on with them more than me. So,
Exactly. Yeah,
but it's also, you have to have that kind of tough skin to
yeah,
know that
yeah.
and to know that people come from all different places. My daughter, when
Mm,
she's working at a grocery store, and she just come home crying because someone was snapped at her. And I said, honey, they were having a bad day.
yeah,
Like it wasn't you.
exactly.
If it was a different cashier that was there, it would have been the different cashier. But it's
Yeah.
hard. It's
It
hard.
is hard. Yeah, and especially early when you're a new writer and you don't know where you fall. That's
Mhm.
one reason that I always advise new writers to enter contests. And
Mhm.
if your heart is crushed super easily, then contests might not be for you, but contests, especially ones where you get some feedback, they can help you become a better
Mhm.
writer. To see if 3 judges say the same thing, it's probably a real problem.
Mhm.
But usually contest judges try really hard to say encouraging things so you'll know what
Right.
your strengths are. And I know for me, entering contests and winning a few, or even finally, and I always consider a final as good as a win when it
Mhm.
comes to contests, that is such an encouragement to me to know that, okay, enough people thought enough of my writing that it rose to the top of 400 or 500, however many entries,
Yeah.
that I was in the top, and that just encourages me so much to go on. And with reviews, I know the first 1-star review was scathing that I got on Beneath the Southern Sky. It was scathing, and it was this long. It went on and on and on. And what crushed me was it appeared very obvious that it wasn't the book they hated, it was me, the author, because of the things
Mm.
that I said, and I took it
Mhm.
very, very personally. And I look back now and just laugh at that, but it was a very real emotion at the time, and I cried for 3 days over that bad review and thought my career is over, I'm done, all of which it's not true for the reasons you said. But now I have learned to not don't put too
Mhm.
much stock in the 1-star reviews, because some people give every book a 1-star review. And then don't take too much stock in in the 5-star reviews. And in the
Yeah, yeah.
1-star reviews, just read it and try to discern, is there something that I could learn that would make me a better
Mhm.
writer from this? And if not, pray for that person, because like you said, they brought their own issues to this and they're struggling. So,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I'm one of those people that give 5-star reviews
yeah.
because I won't post if I think it's less than a 5-star because they're all my friends.
Yes, I know,
And
I'm that
and it
same
might not
way.
be my preference. Like, it just maybe something to the story, it's not my preference. So I
Yeah.
will post 5 stars if because I want, but I don't want any of my friends to see me post like a 4-star. Like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna do that. So
Yep.
So if you look, mine are all 5-star because
Yep.
for that reason. So Ken, what do you have to add? Living with a writer for all these
Living
years.
with a writer?
Oh, that's fine for
Oh
this
no.
one.
Oh.
It's interesting. It's kind of fun because we can talk about creativity and stuff back and
Mhm.
forth. But
Mhm.
her methodology just drives me nuts.
Because I'm type B and he is very type A.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
yeah.
I can stay very focused to the point where I can
Mhm.
drown out everybody and everything else. She can't do that.
No.
Oh.
And so
She was looking at him like, be careful what you say.
here's
No.
what cracks me up is she'll say, okay, I want to get this book done by this date. So if I work 5 days a week and write 1,000 words a day, I'll make that deadline. 2 weeks later, she goes, okay, if I work 6 days a week and do 1,200 words a day, I'll make my deadline. 2 weeks later. Okay, if I write 7 days a week and 2,000 words a day, I'll never make it.
I need an extension.
But that gives us hope though, right? That gives us hope that no
Yeah.
one is perfect about it.
Yeah.
No, we all have, yeah.
I will say she does make her deadlines. I mean,
do.
she actually does.
Mhm.
Just drives me crazy though. But what I've gone to is the last week or two, I make sure and plan all suppers. You know,
He's awesome.
I go
Yeah.
up to Sam's Club and buy their packaged meals, and I go out and get pizza, whatever. So she doesn't have to worry about supper, so she can write. But boy, after that week, she better be making me some supper.
Yeah, that's right. From scratch.
It's the same way with my kids. They're like, Mom must be on deadline because she just gave us money and told us to go to Taco Bell. So.
For sure. Well, I will say though, Ken has always been my biggest supporter. He reads, I mean, this is huge because he reads every single book I write. And
Wow.
he used to, the first couple of books he read my manuscript, but after the second one he said, if you're going to keep doing this, do you mind if I wait until after the book is out before I read it? And so, I mean, I appreciate it because for me to support him, I just have to run down to his office, look at the piece of artwork he did for 3 seconds, and I'm done. But he spends hours and hours supporting me by reading my book. And he always says I'm his favorite author. And he does not read in my genres at all.
Right,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
So, but I really do appreciate that. So,
and that makes a difference. John too has always been supportive. I mean, I was like this 22-year-old going to my first conference. I'm going to be a writer someday, and he's like, "Okay, I'll stay home with these babies. You go off to your conference." And he's out grocery shopping right now. He does all the grocery shopping. Like, I know we can't do what we do without the support of friends and family, so it makes a big difference. I love it. Okay, so where can people go to find, first of all, information about you, Deb, but also maybe they need some cover design work, Ken? Are you open to that? So let us know where people can connect with you guys.
Yeah. And in fact, our son-in-law has started kind of helping Ken with, I mean, he was just swamped for a while. And so he would send some projects to our son-in-law, who is very talented. And so you'll take about any work that comes your way. So
we'll do covers. We also do the formatting, ebook and print. We can design about anything, but websites too. But at kenraney.com.
Okay.
All you have to, that's pretty easy. And Raney is Raney. Most people try to stick an I in there.
Yeah, no I.
Those Raney. And I'm at DeborahRaney.com. DeborahRaney.
All right. Well, thank you guys for giving your time today. And we'll put all the links in there, but I just appreciate you just sharing your heart and your time.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to seeing you in New Orleans at ACF.
I can't wait. Yes, I'm so excited.
We'll see you in a few weeks.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.